My name is Elena. I'm 42 years old, and I learned who truly loved me while I was lying in a hospital bed. The first thing I remember is the sound steady, mechanical, cold. The rhythmic beep of a heart monitor filled the air, each tone reminding me I was still alive. The sterile scent of disinfectant burned my nose, and my mouth was dry, like I'd been chewing on dust. When I tried to move, pain pulsed through my body, sharp and unfamiliar. I blinked against the harsh fluorescent light above me and realized where I was. A hospital. I couldn't recall how I got there. The last thing I remembered was leaving work late, the echo of my heels on the empty office floor. And then darkness. They told me later it was a mild stroke, triggered by exhaustion and stress. I'd always thought I was invincible, the kind of woman who could juggle deadlines, bills, and family obligations without breaking. Turns out I was wrong. When the door opened, I thought it might be a doctor. Instead, it was my brother, Aaron. He stepped inside with his usual briskness, his phone still in hand, barely looking up from the screen. "Hey, you're awake," he said, like I'd just been napping. Behind him was his wife, Lisa, wearing a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You gave us quite a scare," she said. I wanted to believe her, but the way she perched on the edge of the chair, careful not to wrinkle her expensive coat, told me her concern was superficial. My niece Megan hovered near the doorway, scrolling on her phone, muttering a bored, "Hi, Aunt Elena." "I'm okay," I managed to whisper, my voice hoarse. Aaron nodded absently. "Good. The doctor said you'll need rest. You've been overworking again." Lisa sighed. "We told you this would happen eventually. You should really slow down, Elena." Their words sounded like care, but the tone was heavy with blame. I nodded weakly, too tired to argue. They stayed only 15 minutes, long enough to ask logistical questions: what insurance I had, where my house keys were, if I'd already set up automatic bill payments. When I said I wasn't sure, Lisa's eyes narrowed. "You really need to get your affairs in order. You're not a kid anymore," Aaron added. "Yeah, we can help manage things while you're recovering." I wanted to tell them I was fine, that I didn't need anyone to manage my life, but even lifting my head felt like moving a mountain. After they left, the silence in the room pressed against me like a weight. That's when I noticed her. The nurse. She was adjusting the IV line at my bedside, humming softly to herself. She had warm eyes, the kind that didn't dart around the room impatiently like everyone else's. Her name tag read Mara Collins. "Family can be overwhelming," she said gently, as if she could read my thoughts. I tried to smile, but it felt more like a grimace. "They mean well," I whispered. Mara gave me a small, knowing smile. "Maybe. But meaning well and doing well aren't always the same thing." Something in her tone, calm, steady, put me at ease. She adjusted my blanket, checked my vitals, and asked if I wanted water. I nodded, and she helped me sip through a straw, her movements careful and patient. "There," she said softly. "Better?" I nodded again, whispering, "Thank you." She smiled. "That's my job. But I'm glad you're awake. You've been out for almost 2 days." "2 days?" I breathed. "Your body's been through a lot. Don't rush it." For the first time since waking up, someone's words didn't feel like criticism. They felt like care. That night, as the hallway lights dimmed and the monitors glowed faintly in the dark, I couldn't sleep. My body hurt, but it was more than that, something deeper, a heaviness in my chest that had nothing to do with my health. I thought about my life. I'd worked hard for everything. I had a stable career, a house, a modest savings account. I'd helped Aaron through college, lent Lisa money when they needed it, even covered Megan's tuition once. Yet lying there, frail and alone, I couldn't help but wonder, would any of them do the same for me? The truth stung. I already knew the answer. Around midnight, Mara came in again. She moved quietly, checking the machines, adjusting my blanket. She didn't speak until she noticed my eyes were open. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. "Not really." She nodded, pulling up a chair beside the bed. It's hard to rest when your mind's louder than the machines. I smiled weakly. You've done this a while, haven't you? 20 years, she said. People don't change much, but their hearts do. I didn't know exactly what she meant, but her presence was comforting. She didn't ask questions, didn't fill the silence with platitudes. She just sat there, humming faintly while she wrote something in my chart. Do you ever get tired of it? I asked suddenly. Caring for people? She looked at me then, her eyes kind but firm. Never. Everyone needs someone, and sometimes, even a stranger can be that person. Her words lingered long after she left the room. That night, as I listened to the silence after they left, I realized I was safer with a stranger than with my own blood. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my family arguing right outside my hospital door. At first, I thought I was dreaming. The muffled voices drifted through the thin walls, sharp and tense. Then, as my head cleared, I realized they were real. I recognized my brother's low, impatient tone and Lisa's higher, defensive one. I'm just saying, Aaron, Lisa hissed. If she doesn't recover fully, someone has to take care of her finances. I know, Aaron replied, his voice clipped. But we can't let everything just sit there. She's got savings, stocks, a house. It's irresponsible to leave it unmanaged. I'm not arguing with you, Lisa snapped. I'm just saying we should be proactive. Hospitals aren't cheap. If she's not thinking straight, she might make the wrong decisions. I felt my stomach tighten. They were talking about me like I was already gone. I turned my head toward the door, willing them to stop, but their voices only grew louder. Lisa said, You know she's always been stubborn about her money. Remember when she refused to let us refinance her house? Maybe this time she won't have a choice, Aaron sighed. Let's just hope the lawyer doesn't make things complicated. If she already has a will, we'll need to see it. The words lawyer and will hit me like a jolt. My pulse quickened, setting off the heart monitor beside me. They didn't even know if I could hear them, but I could, every word. Before I could find the strength to call out, the door opened. Mara stepped in, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. Excuse me, she said, her tone polite but firm. You'll need to lower your voices. This is a recovery ward, not a conference room. Aaron turned toward her, visibly annoyed. We're just discussing family matters. I understand, she replied evenly, but the patient you're discussing can hear every word you're saying. Their faces froze. Lisa's fake smile returned. Of course, nurse. We didn't mean to disturb anyone. Then please, Mara said, her tone unyielding. Let her rest. Aaron muttered something under his breath, but they both left. The door clicked shut, and the room fell silent again. I felt my throat tighten with humiliation. The beeping of the monitor slowed as I tried to steady my breathing. Mara turned to me, her expression softening instantly. Are you okay? I nodded weakly, blinking back tears. They were talking about my estate, I whispered. She hesitated before answering. I heard enough. A tear slipped down my cheek. They didn't even ask how I'm feeling. Mara gently adjusted my pillow. I'm sorry, Elena. People get scared when money and mortality mix. They start showing you who they really are. I swallowed hard. They think I'm dying. Do you think you're dying? Her question caught me off guard. No, I said after a moment. The doctor said I'll recover. Then hold on to that, she said quietly. The rest? It's just noise. She smiled then. A small, genuine curve of her lips. It wasn't pity, it was understanding. The rest of the day passed slowly. My family didn't come back, and part of me was relieved. Every time the door opened, I hoped it was Mara. When it was her, the room felt lighter. At lunch, she brought me soup and stayed while I ate. How's the food? She asked. Better than it looks, I said, managing a small laugh. That's what I tell everyone. She chuckled. Hospital cooking, culinary optimism at its finest. Her humor was soft and gentle, not forced like Lisa's. It didn't demand anything of me, it simply existed to make me feel human again. You've been a nurse for a while, haven't you? I asked. 20 years, she said. Long enough to see what people become when life gets hard. And? She smiled faintly. Some crumble, some fight, and some, like you, start to see things clearly. I looked down at my trembling hands. I just feel alone. You're not, she said simply. Something about the way she said it made me believe her. That night, as I lay in the dim room, her words replayed in my mind. Maybe I wasn't alone, not truly. Maybe kindness could come from unexpected places. When Mara checked on me before her shift ended, I asked, "Why are you so kind to people like me? You don't even know us." She paused, adjusting my blanket. Because most people don't get kindness when they need it most. I can't fix everything, but I can make someone's day hurt a little less. Her answer settled into my heart like warmth spreading through cold air. After she left, I turned my head toward the window. Outside, the city lights shimmered, and I could see faint reflections of passing cars. Somewhere in that quiet glow, I made a small, silent promise to myself to remember who stood by me when I had nothing to give. That's when I realized my family wasn't waiting for me to recover, they were waiting for me to fade. Mara had the kind of kindness that didn't ask for anything in return. In the days that followed, her presence became the one steady rhythm in my life. Every morning, just before sunrise, she'd walk in with a quiet smile, carrying a tray of breakfast that actually looked edible. The food never mattered, it was the way she set it down. Careful not to wake me too abruptly, whispering, "Morning sunshine," as though the world outside my hospital window wasn't cold and mechanical. She checked my vitals, asked how I slept, and always waited for me to answer honestly. No one else did that. My family called sometimes, but only to ask the same question. When are they releasing you? I'd stopped hoping for warmth in their voices. With Mara, I didn't have to hope. It was just there. She'd tell me stories as she tidied my room or adjusted my IV. Funny ones, sad ones that made me realize she carried entire lives inside her, the echoes of people she'd cared for and lost. There was a gentleness in the way she spoke about them, like she was honoring their memory each time she mentioned their names. "You must see a lot of people come and go," I said one morning, watching her replace the flowers on my table. She nodded. "Too many. Some leave stronger, some leave peacefully, and some just leave." I hesitated before asking, "Doesn't it get to you? All that loss?" Her smile was wistful. "It used to. But I learned something early on. If I let every goodbye break me, I'd have nothing left to give the next person who needs me." I thought about that long after she left the room. Giving and giving, without expectation. How does someone do that and still stay whole? That evening, when Mara came to check on me again, I asked her to sit for a while. She looked surprised but obliged, pulling up a chair beside my bed. "I don't want to sound ungrateful," I began. "But why are you so kind to me? You've got a dozen other patients," she smiled. "Because you talk to me like a person. Most people talk at me. You listen. You look me in the eye." I frowned. "That seems like the least I can do." "You'd be surprised how rare it is," she said softly. "When people are sick, they look right through you. I get it, it's fear. But you see people, even when you're the one hurting." Her words stunned me. No one had ever said anything like that before. My family saw me as capable, successful, dependable but never present. To them, I was just the one who handled things. Mara saw something else. The next few days blurred together in a haze of medication and slow progress. My strength began to return, but I found myself almost afraid of recovery. What would happen when I left this place? Would Mara fade from my life the way most kind people do once they've done their part? On the fourth night, I couldn't sleep. The hospital was too quiet, and every shadow felt heavier than the last. I pressed the call button not because I needed anything, but because I wanted to see her. When she appeared in the doorway, her eyes softened instantly. Rough night? Just can't sleep, I admitted. She came in and adjusted my blanket, her movements graceful and familiar. Want me to stay a few minutes? I nodded. She sat down again, her hands folded neatly in her lap. For a while, neither of us spoke. The sound of the heart monitor filled the silence between us. Can I tell you something? I asked finally. Of course. I heard my family arguing the other morning. About my estate. Her expression didn't change, but I saw her jaw tighten slightly. I figured as much. I'm not surprised, I said quietly. I just thought, I don't know, that I mattered to them more than what I could leave behind. You do matter, she said softly. But not everyone knows how to value what matters. Her words were simple, but they settled in my heart like truth. I've spent my whole life making sure they were comfortable, I said. Paying for things. Fixing problems. I didn't think twice. But the moment I needed something just a little care, they treated me like a burden. Mara sighed. Sometimes the people we give the most to are the ones who appreciate it the least. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were fierce, like she'd lived that truth herself. You sound like you've been through it too, I said. She chuckled softly. Haven't we all? My mother used to say, kindness doesn't make you soft, it makes you strong enough to keep loving in a world that forgets how. I try to remember that. That sentence hit me harder than it should have. Maybe because I'd forgotten what strength looked like. I'd spent years believing that being strong meant keeping quiet, carrying weight no one saw, never asking for help. But looking at Mara, I realized strength could also be soft. It could be warm, it could be her. When she stood to leave, she paused at the door. Try to get some sleep, okay? I'll try, I said, though I knew I wouldn't. After she left, I lay there in the dark, replaying every word we'd shared. There was something healing in her presence. Something honest and unforced. She didn't need to fill the silence with empty comfort. She was the comfort. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible, I felt seen. 3 days later, my family came back not to see me, but to make plans. I knew it the moment they walked in. There was no warmth, no, how are you feeling? Or, we missed you. Just Aaron, holding a clipboard like a general preparing for battle, and Lisa carrying her usual perfume cloud of self-importance. Megan wasn't with them this time, probably too busy living a life I'd quietly helped fund. Hey sis, Aaron said, pulling up a chair beside my bed. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. You're looking better. Thank you, I said softly, though his eyes were already on the papers in his hand. Lisa gave me a polite smile. We just wanted to stop by and make sure you're comfortable. Comfortable enough, I said. The staff's been wonderful. Her gaze shifted to Mara's flowers by my bedside, her nose wrinkling slightly. Oh, how nice. The nurse gave you those? Yes, I said, smiling faintly. She's been very kind. Lisa gave a small hum that somehow managed to sound judgmental. That's sweet. Aaron cleared his throat. So, Elena, there are a few things we should discuss. My stomach tightened. Like what? He exchanged a quick glance with Lisa, then said, just practical stuff. Bills, accounts, your house. I blinked. My house? Well, you've been here over a week, Lisa said in her reasonable tone. And with your health still uncertain, we thought it might be smart to plan ahead, you know, in case this turns into something long-term. I'm recovering, I said sharply. Aaron smiled, patronizing. Of course, but you can't be too careful. You've got a lot of assets sitting idle. You wouldn't want anything to get mismanaged. I stared at them both, disbelief tightening my throat. You mean you don't want it mismanaged? Lisa raised her eyebrows. Elena, we're just trying to help. You've always been generous, but you've never been great with letting people assist you. I don't need your help with my life, I said, my voice trembling not with weakness but with restraint. Aaron's smile faltered. You're not thinking clearly right now. This could all go smoother if you let us handle things. We can contact your lawyer and stop, I said, my heart rate climbing. The monitor beside me beeped faster. You're talking about my estate like I'm not even here. Aaron sighed. No one's saying that. But we have to be realistic. The door opened. Mara stepped in, clipboard in hand, her expression calm but watchful. Everything okay in here? Aaron straightened immediately, his tone clipped. We're fine. This is a family discussion. I can tell, Mara said evenly, glancing at the monitor. But her blood pressure says otherwise. Lisa stood. We're not upsetting her. We're just trying to make sure things are organized. Then maybe you should organize your tone, Mara replied, cool and professional. Aaron turned to her, jaw tightening. Excuse me? She met his glare without flinching. Excuse me for doing my job protecting my patient's health. For a moment, no one spoke. Aaron looked ready to explode, but Lisa grabbed his arm, forcing a smile. We'll continue this later. Let's not make a scene. Good idea, Mara said softly, not breaking eye contact. When they finally left, the room felt lighter, as if the air itself had been cleansed. I let out a shaky breath. You didn't have to do that. She gave me a half smile. Yes, I did. They were upsetting you. I laughed weakly. You're not afraid of anyone, are you? Only spiders, she said, pretending to shudder. People? Not so much. Her humor disarmed me, but the truth lingered in my chest like a bruise. My family hadn't come to support me, they'd come to position themselves for what came next. I felt sick thinking about it. When Mara sat beside me, she didn't say anything at first. She just placed her hand gently over mine, grounding me. You're more than what they want from you, Elena, she said quietly. Don't forget that. Her words hit deep. I stared at the ceiling, blinking back tears. I've spent my whole life making sure they were taken care of, I whispered. I paid their debts, helped with Megan's college. I thought, maybe it meant something. It probably did once, she said softly. But sometimes people forget kindness when they start counting it. I turned to her, my throat tight. You really think that's all they see me as? A wallet? I think they've forgotten to see you as a person, she said gently. That's not your fault. Silence settled over us again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind that feels like healing the pause between an old wound and a new decision. Mara eventually stood to leave. You need rest, she said. Try not to let them drain your energy. You'll need it for recovery. I nodded, watching her walk away. The door closed softly behind her, leaving me alone with the hum of the machines and the flicker of my thoughts. They'd tried to claim my life while I was still breathing. That was the moment something inside me hardened, not out of spite, but out of clarity. If they wanted to treat me like I was already gone, I'd make sure my departure meant something. I wasn't going to let greed write my ending. I glanced toward the flowers Mara had replaced earlier that morning. Yellow tulips, bright, hopeful, alive. A slow smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. That night, I stared at the ceiling and decided my legacy would go to someone who actually earned it. The hospital was quiet. The halls had that strange, sterile stillness that only existed after visiting hours ended. The world, outside my window, glowed with the distant hum of city lights, but inside, everything felt suspended like time was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a move. I lay there, the soft hiss of the oxygen machine filling the silence, and thought about every sacrifice I'd ever made. Every dollar I'd lent, every favor I'd done, every time I'd bitten my tongue to keep the peace. My life had been a long list of yeses for people who only showed up when it benefited them. I'd helped Aaron pay off his student loans when he was drowning in debt. I'd co-signed Lisa's car when her credit score was too low. I'd sent Megan money every semester because textbooks were so expensive. And yet, none of that mattered. Not one of them had asked how I was feeling when I woke up in that hospital bed. They hadn't even remembered to bring me flowers. It wasn't just greed, it was entitlement. Somewhere along the way, They'd stopped seeing me as family and started seeing me as a resource. And as I stared at the ceiling, a single thought bloomed quietly, firmly, completely. I am done being their safety net. The next morning, Mara came in, cheerful as always. "Morning, sunshine. How's the world treating you today?" I smiled faintly. "Better, now that you're here." She laughed softly, brushing a few strands of hair out of her face as she checked my chart. "You keep saying that. I'm starting to think you're just being nice." "No," I said, my voice steady. "I mean it." She paused, meeting my eyes, and something in her expression softened. "Well, I'm glad I can help." She was the only one who did help. Not for thanks, not for money, just because it was who she was. After she left, I picked up the hospital phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Elena Turner," came the voice of Mr. Hensley, my lawyer. "Good morning. How are you holding up?" I hesitated, then said, "Better than I should be, considering the company I've had." He chuckled lightly, though there was a note of concern. "I take it the family's been less than supportive?" "You could say that," I replied. "They've already started talking about my estate. While I'm still breathing." "Ah." His voice softened. "I see." I took a deep breath. "I want to make changes to my will." "Of course. I can visit you at the hospital if you'd like. We can handle everything discreetly. Today," I said firmly. "I don't want to wait." He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then said, "I'll be there by noon." When I hung up, my pulse was steady. For the first time in weeks, my mind felt clear. Around 11, Mara came in again to check on me. She was humming, her energy a gentle comfort in the sterile room. "You've been busy this morning," she said playfully, noticing the phone still resting beside me. "I have," I said. "I had some calls to make. Important ones?" I nodded. "Very." She smiled, oblivious to what I meant. "Good. It's nice to see you taking control again." Control. That was exactly what it was. For years, my family had dictated the narrative, what I owed, what I should do, who I should be. Not anymore. At noon sharp, Mr. Hensley arrived. Mara greeted him at the door before stepping aside to give us privacy. He sat by my bed, placing his briefcase carefully on his lap. "You said you want to make revisions?" "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "Major ones." He opened his notepad. "Tell me." So I did. I told him everything, the arguments outside my door, the way my family treated my life like a financial plan, and the nurse who had shown me more care in a week than my own blood had in years. Mr. Hensley listened without interruption, his pen gliding silently across the paper. When I finished, he looked up, eyes thoughtful. "Elena, are you absolutely sure about this?" "More sure than I've ever been about anything," he nodded slowly. "Then we'll proceed." We discussed the legalities, the transfer of assets, the trust account, the final stipulations. I wanted to make sure there would be no loopholes, no chance for Aaron or Lisa to undo what I'd done. Mr. Hensley assured me it could be done. When we finished, I signed the initial paperwork, my hand trembling slightly but my resolve unshaken. "There," I said, handing the pen back. "Done." He smiled faintly. "You look lighter already." "I feel lighter," I admitted. "For the first time, I'm doing something that actually feels right." He gathered his papers, standing to leave. "You've made your intentions clear, Miss Turner. I'll finalize everything tomorrow." As he left, Mara came in, curious. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," I said, smiling faintly. "Just tying up loose ends." She nodded, oblivious to what I'd set in motion. "Good. Closure is healing." I looked at her for a long moment, realizing how much truth was in those words. "Yeah," I said softly. "It really is." That night, as I drifted towards sleep, the faint scent of tulips filled the air. My heart was steady, my conscience clear. My life finally belonged to me, and soon, it would belong to someone who deserved it. By the time my lawyer arrived, I already knew exactly what I wanted to do. Mr. Hensley arrived that afternoon, his briefcase full of quiet power. He was an older man, in his late 60s maybe, with a calm, deliberate way about him. Everything he did carried weight, each word, each movement. I'd worked with him before when I'd first set up my will years ago, back when I still believed family loyalty was unbreakable. Now, seeing him again, I realized I was rewriting not just a document but a lifetime of misplaced trust. He closed the door softly behind him and gave me a warm smile. Miss Turner, you look stronger than when I saw you last. Looks can be deceiving, I said, returning his smile faintly. But thank you. He took a seat beside my bed, setting down his leather briefcase with care. You mentioned on the phone that you want to make major revisions. I assume you've given this plenty of thought? I've given it too much thought, I replied. And I've finally made up my mind. Mara, ever respectful, had stepped out when he entered. I could still hear her faint footsteps fading down the hall. I want everything changed, I continued. My house, my savings, my investments, all of it. Mr. Hensley nodded, flipping open a notepad. To whom will the new distribution go? I took a breath, my fingers gripping the blanket tightly. To someone who's earned it. He studied me for a moment, eyes narrowing slightly in curiosity. And who might that be? I hesitated. Saying her name out loud made it feel real, almost sacred. My nurse. Her name's Mara Collins. He blinked once, not in judgment, but in quiet consideration. Your nurse? Yes, I said firmly. She's been with me every day since I was admitted. She's kind, patient, and she's shown me more humanity in 2 weeks than my family has in years. He scribbled her name down. And your family is aware of this decision? Not yet, I said, my tone cooling. But they'll find out soon enough. I overheard them discussing my estate outside my door, as if I were already gone. They've made their intentions clear. He nodded solemnly. Greed has a way of revealing truth, doesn't it? It does, I said quietly. And I'm tired of rewarding it. For the next hour, we went over every detail. Mr. Hensley explained the legalities with his usual precision. He made sure I understood every clause, every implication. There would be protections documents to prevent contests or challenges. He told me that my wishes, once notarized, would stand. At one point, he looked up from his paperwork and asked gently, "Are you sure this isn't being done in anger?" I thought about that for a long moment. No, I said finally. It's not anger, it's clarity. I'm not punishing them, I'm honoring the person who showed me what care really means. He smiled faintly. Then I'll make sure your clarity is honored exactly as you intend. As he drafted the new clauses, Mara knocked softly and peeked in. Everything okay? I smiled. Yes, we're just about finished. Mr. Hensley nodded politely to her. You must be Nurse Collins. I've heard your name quite a bit today. She blinked, clearly surprised. Oh? I hope it was good. The best, I said, my eyes meeting hers. She smiled uncertainly, probably assuming we were discussing her care methods or bedside manner. I didn't correct her. Not yet. After she left again, Mr. Hensley slid the papers toward me. Everything's in order. If you're ready to sign, I'll have it witnessed and notarized within the hour. I picked up the pen, my hand trembling slightly not from doubt, but from the gravity of it all. As the pen touched the paper, my heartbeat steadied. The strokes of ink were final, deliberate, and freeing. When I finished, I looked up and exhaled. There, that's the first thing I've done for myself in a very long time. Mr. Hensley gathered the documents carefully. You've made a brave choice, Miss Turner. Bravery has nothing to do with it, I said softly. I just got tired of being everyone else's safety net. He smiled. Then maybe it's time you learn to fall and let someone catch you for a change. That sentence lingered after he left. Later that evening, Mara returned for her night shift. She checked my vitals, adjusted my IV, and noticed the faintest trace of exhaustion on my face. "Rough day?" she asked gently. "Eventful," I said. She tilted her head. "The lawyer, was it? Something serious?" "Just business," I replied, smiling faintly. "Nothing for you to worry about." She nodded, though curiosity flickered briefly in her eyes. "You seem different," she said. "Lighter somehow." "Maybe I finally realized what matters," I said. She smiled, setting down the clipboard. "That's a good feeling. You'd be surprised how many people never get there." I watched her move around the room, efficient, calm, unflinching. Every gesture she made was filled with purpose but never haste. For her, care wasn't just a job, it was an art. When she left the room that night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling again, but this time, I wasn't restless. My heart didn't ache, and my thoughts weren't angry. There was only peace. I had finally taken back my story quietly, decisively. No drama, no shouting, no grand confrontation. Just a signature that spoke louder than any words ever could. When I signed those papers, I wasn't just leaving an inheritance, I was reclaiming my worth. My family came back the next day, and this time, they weren't pretending anymore. I'd barely finished breakfast when the door burst open. Aaron was first, his face red and tight with anger. Lisa followed close behind, her tone sharp before she even spoke. "Elena," she said, "we need to talk. Now." Mara, who had been helping me adjust the bed, immediately straightened, her calm demeanor freezing into quiet alertness. She glanced at me for permission to stay. I gave a tiny nod. Aaron didn't bother with greetings. "Why was your lawyer here yesterday?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Don't play dumb," Lisa snapped. "We saw him leave. The receptionist told us he'd been visiting you for over an hour." I looked between them, forcing myself to stay composed. "He was here because I asked him to be." Aaron folded his arms. "About what?" "About my estate," I said evenly. His jaw tightened. "What did you change?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The look in my eyes must have told him everything. Lisa scoffed, crossing her arms. "You can't be serious. You're in a hospital bed, medicated, exhausted. This isn't the time to make big decisions." I laughed softly. "You mean it's not the time for you to lose control?" Aaron stepped forward, his voice rising. "This is insane. You can't just rewrite everything without consulting us." "We're your family, are you?" I asked quietly. That stopped him for half a second. Then the anger returned, full force. "Don't you dare pull that martyr act. We've always been there for you." "Really?" I said, meeting his glare. "When? When you needed me to co-sign your loan? When Lisa wanted help with her business? When Megan's tuition was due? Tell me, Aaron, when exactly have you been there for me?" He didn't answer. Lisa's voice cut in, defensive and shrill. "We're just trying to protect what's rightfully ours." I turned toward her, incredulous. "Rightfully yours? You're already talking about my things like I'm gone." Mara stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. and Mrs. Langley, maybe this isn't the best time." Aaron spun on her. "Stay out of this. You've already done enough." Mara froze, her eyes flashing. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," he said coldly. "I know exactly what's going on here. You've been filling her head with nonsense, haven't you? Playing the sweet, caring nurse while you line yourself up for a payday." The words hit like a slap, not to me, but to Mara. I could see it in her face. The mix of disbelief and insult. She opened her mouth to respond, but I beat her to it. "Stop it," I snapped. Aaron turned to me, eyes blazing. "You don't see it, do you? She's manipulating you." "No," I said, my voice rising. "She's helping me. She's the only one who has." Lisa rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. You've known her 2 weeks, Elena. You've known us your whole life." "Exactly," I said, my tone cold. "And I've spent my whole life watching you care about what I have, not who I am." Mara took a small step forward, her voice shaking slightly now. Mrs. Langley, Mr. Langley, I have never taken advantage of a patient in my life. Everything I've done for your sister has been part of my job because I care about her as a person, not as a bank account. Aaron sneered. Oh, please. You expect us to believe that? I don't care what you believe, Mara said quietly. The room went still. Aaron's hand clenched at his side, his jaw grinding. This isn't over, he said finally. You can't just, I can, I interrupted. And I already did. He froze. What? I met his eyes, steady and unflinching. I heard you, Aaron. That morning outside my door. You and Lisa talking about my money, my house, my will. You didn't even bother to lower your voices. You were planning my future like I was already dead. Lisa's face went pale. Elena? That's not fair. No, I said sharply. What's not fair is being treated like a burden when all I've ever done is give. What's not fair is realizing that the only person who saw me as human in this place isn't even related to me. Mara tried to speak, but I reached out and grabbed her hand before she could. You, I said to her softly, don't have to defend yourself. You've done nothing wrong. Aaron's voice cracked with disbelief. You really changed your will for her? I didn't blink. Yes. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. You can't. I already did, I said again, my voice calm and final. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Aaron's mouth opened, but no words came out. Lisa's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of fury. You've gone mad, she whispered. You've let this woman take everything from you. No, I said softly. I've finally taken something back. Mara's hand tightened around mine, her eyes glistening. Aaron's voice turned icy. You'll regret this, Elena. I swear you will. Maybe, I said, leaning back against the pillow. But at least it'll be my decision to regret. He turned abruptly and stormed out, Lisa following behind him, muttering something under her breath about lawsuits and family betrayal. When the door finally shut, the silence felt deafening. Mara turned to me, her face pale. Elena, you didn't really Yes, I said simply, I did. She shook her head slowly. You didn't have to do that for me. I didn't do it for you, I said, looking at her. I did it because you cared. That's something money can't buy. Her eyes filled with tears, she tried to blink away. I smiled faintly. Besides, I've learned that family isn't always the people who share your blood. Sometimes, it's the ones who show up when no one else does. Mara sat on the edge of the bed, her voice barely a whisper. You're something else, Elena. I laughed softly, though my chest ached. Maybe for once that's not an insult. And when I said I'd already handled my will, their faces went white. They exploded all at once, shock, rage, disbelief. Aaron's threats echoed in my head long after he stormed out, his words sharp as glass. For a moment, the hospital room felt smaller, the walls closing in with the weight of what had just happened. I sat there, trembling, not from fear, but from the realization that I had finally broken the unspoken rule of our family. I had said no. Mara stayed with me, her hands steady even as her eyes betrayed concern. You shouldn't let them get to you, she said softly, checking the monitor beside my bed. Your blood pressure's already high. I tried to smile, but my voice shook. They'll never. Forgive me for this. Then they'll have to live with that, she replied simply. You can't keep setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. Her words hit like a balm, painful, but healing. She was right. I'd spent my entire adult life cushioning them from consequences, paying their debts, absorbing their anger, protecting their pride. And the moment I protected myself instead, I became the villain. But villains, I decided, sleep better than martyrs. It didn't take long for the storm to return. The next morning, Aaron came back, this time with Lisa and an older man I didn't recognize, his lawyer. The hospital staff tried to stop them at the nurses' station, but they pushed past, insisting it was a family matter. When they entered, Mara was already in the room, refilling my water and taking notes on her clipboard. Aaron wasted no time. "We need to see the will," he demanded. I looked at him coolly. "You won't." He took a step closer. "You think you can just hand over everything to some stranger and get away with it? This isn't a movie, Elena. There are laws." "There are?" I said calmly. And I followed them. Lisa jumped in, her voice high and brittle. "You're not thinking clearly. You've been on medication. How do we know you weren't coerced?" Mara froze, her pen stilling over the chart. "Excuse me?" Lisa's eyes flashed. "Oh, please. Don't play innocent. You've probably been whispering things into her ear this whole time, manipulating her while she's vulnerable." I felt something hot rise in my chest. "Enough, Lisa." Aaron's lawyer stepped forward, trying to smooth the tension. "Mrs. Turner," he began cautiously, "it's not uncommon for families to be concerned about sudden legal changes during medical recovery. We just need clarification." I cut him off. "You're welcome to your concern, but not my papers." Aaron sneered. "You can't keep this hidden. Once we file for access, the truth will come out." "The truth?" I said, my voice steadying. "You mean the truth that you've been waiting for me to die so you can divide my assets?" "Because that truth already came out." His face went red. "You're twisting this." "I'm correcting it," I said. The argument grew louder, voices overlapping. Lisa accused. Aaron threatened. The lawyer tried to mediate. Through it all, Mara stayed silent, her eyes burning with quiet fury. Finally, she stepped forward. "That's enough," she said, her voice sharp as steel. "You're upsetting my patient." Aaron turned to her, sneering. "Your patient is my sister. And as her nurse, it's my job to protect her from stress," Mara said, unflinching. Lisa's tone dripped with venom. "Protect her? Or isolate her? Get out," I said quietly. Aaron blinked. "What?" I said, "Get out." He laughed bitterly. "You can't be serious." "I am," I said, my voice rising. "You don't get to come in here, insult the one person who's actually cared for me, and pretend you're the victim. You've been vultures since the day I opened my eyes in this bed." The room fell silent except for the beeping of the monitor. Aaron tried to speak, but I cut him off again. "You can shout, you can threaten, you can even take me to court, but you will not change my mind. Not this time." The doctor entered then, drawn by the commotion. He looked from me to my family and back again, frowning. "What's going on here?" Before I could answer, Mara spoke. "They're causing unnecessary distress for the patient. I've asked them to leave." Aaron turned toward the doctor, fuming. "We're her family. We have a right to be here." The doctor's expression hardened. "You have a right to visit. Not to harass. If this continues, I'll call security." Lisa's jaw dropped. "You can't do that." "Yes, I can," the doctor said flatly. Aaron glared at him, then at me. "Fine," he spat. "We're leaving. But this isn't over." He stormed toward the door, Lisa close behind him. At the threshold, she turned back and hissed. "You'll regret this, Elena." I met her gaze calmly. "I already regret wasting so many years trying to please you." When the door finally closed behind them, the silence that followed wasn't empty, it was cleansing. The doctor exhaled. "You did well," he said softly before leaving us alone. Mara sat down beside me, her face pale. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that." I looked at her, my voice softer now. "You've done nothing wrong. They're just angry because they lost control." Her eyes glistened. "Still. I hate that they spoke to you like that." I smiled faintly. "They've been speaking to me like that my entire life. The difference is, I finally stopped listening." Mara squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than you think, Elena." "Maybe," I said quietly. "Or maybe I just got tired of being weak." That night, I lay awake, the echoes of the confrontation replaying in my mind. But instead of pain, I felt an odd sense of peace. I had stood up for myself for the first time. Truly stood up, and I wasn't afraid of the consequences. The only thing I feared now was how far my family would go next. When the door finally closed, I knew I'd said goodbye to them for good. After they left, the room felt quiet in a new way, like it finally belonged to me. The chaos had settled, but its echoes still lingered in the sterile air. My body ached, not from illness, but from the exhaustion of emotional battle. The monitor's soft beeping was the only sound, calm and steady, like a heartbeat reminding me I'd survived more than just a health scare. I'd survived a lifetime of being silenced. Mara came back in after a few minutes, her expression carefully neutral, though I could tell she was still angry on my behalf. She moved around the room quietly, straightening the tray table, fluffing the pillow, doing anything that gave her hands purpose. "You didn't have to stay," I said softly. She stopped and looked at me. "I wanted to." Her tone was simple, but there was something steady and loyal in it. She wasn't just doing her job, she was choosing to be here. I exhaled slowly. "I've never had anyone stand up for me like that before." She smiled faintly. "You shouldn't have to thank people for decency, but I'll take it anyway." We shared a small laugh, one that eased the heaviness in my chest. Over the next few days, recovery started to feel real. My appetite returned, my body grew stronger, and the color came back to my face. Mara said the improvement was remarkable, but I knew what it really was: peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by their expectations. I didn't have to be the provider, the fixer, the dependable one. I could just be Elena. Every morning, Mara came in with her calm voice and soft humor, and every evening she left me with a warmth that lingered long after the door closed. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled through the blinds, she brought me a small book from the hospital's lending shelf. "You strike me as a reader," she said, placing it on the tray. I smiled. "You strike me as someone who sees people for who they are." She chuckled. "That's part of the job. You learn to look past the noise." I looked at her, really looked. There was something about Mara that fascinated me: her quiet strength, her humility, the way she carried kindness like armor instead of burden. She reminded me of what I used to want to be before years of disappointment dulled my edges. As I read the book later, her words echoed in my mind. Look past the noise. The next day, a letter arrived. It was from Mr. Hensley, confirming that all documents had been finalized and securely filed. The will, my wishes, the trust, all legally binding. I traced my finger over his signature and felt a calm satisfaction settle in my chest. Mara noticed the letter when she walked in that afternoon. "Good news?" she asked. I nodded. "Everything's done, officially." "That must be a relief." "It is," I said. "It feels like closure." She gave a small nod, then paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Was it really worth it, cutting them off like that?" I thought about it for a long moment before answering. "Yes," I said finally. "Because I didn't cut them off, I freed myself. There's a difference." Mara's eyes softened. "That's brave." "Maybe," I said, smiling faintly. "Or maybe it's just overdue." She didn't press. That was what I loved most about her. She never demanded more than I could give. Her presence was gentle but grounding, like gravity itself. That night, I wrote a letter to accompany my will. It wasn't for my family, it was for Mara. I wrote about how she'd changed my view of humanity, how her compassion had restored a faith I thought I'd lost forever. I told her that she reminded me that kindness is not a transaction, and that true care can come from those who owe us nothing. At the bottom, I wrote one line that summed up everything I felt. "I give not to those who expect, but to those who care." When I sealed the envelope, my hands didn't tremble. There was no guilt, no hesitation, just peace. The next few days were quiet and calm. Mara and I talked about little things: books, coffee, the weather, the absurdity of hospital food. We laughed, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the next blow. One morning, as she helped me take my first few steps with the walker, she said, "You're stronger than you think, you know that?" I smiled. "Maybe because you remind me I can be." Her eyes warmed. No one reminded you you remembered yourself. I wanted to tell her how much she meant to me, how deeply she'd changed my life. But I didn't know how to say it without breaking down, so I said the simplest truth I could manage. Thank you, Mara, for everything. She placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You don't owe me thanks. Just promise me one thing, don't let bitterness take the place of peace. I nodded. I won't. I've already made my peace. That night, I sat by the window, the moonlight painting soft lines across the floor. The city below was alive, unaware of the quiet revolution happening in one hospital room. I thought about all the years I'd wasted giving my love to people who mistook it for weakness. I thought about how easy it was to lose yourself in trying to be everything for everyone. And then I thought about Mara, the one person who'd shown me that care doesn't need to be earned. I breathed deeply, the air cool and clean. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what came next. And when I sealed that letter, I finally felt free. News travels fast in small towns, and bad news travels even faster. I was still in the hospital when the whispers started. At first, I didn't notice. The nurses still smiled when they came into my room, and Mara's calm presence shielded me from most of the outside noise. But one afternoon, when I was walking slowly down the hall for my physical therapy session, I caught fragments of conversation between two volunteers. That's the one who left everything to her nurse. Family's furious, filed something with a lawyer. They fell silent as soon as they realized I could hear them. I didn't need to confront them. The looks on their faces confirmed everything. The story had spread, twisted by gossip into something scandalous. When I returned to my room, Mara was waiting with my lunch tray. She took one look at my expression and frowned. Rough therapy? Rough hallway, I said dryly, sitting down on the bed. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Ah, the rumor mill? I nodded. It's already making its rounds. She sighed, setting the tray down. They always do. People love drama more than truth. I'm used to being talked about, I said quietly. But this feels different. They make it sound like I'm some bitter woman getting revenge from her deathbed. Mara sat beside me, her voice calm. You know the truth. That's what matters. I looked at her, tired. Does it? The truth never stopped people from twisting it before. She smiled faintly. No. But it stops you from living in their version of it. Her words, simple and steady, cut through the noise like sunlight breaking through fog. Still, I couldn't shake the heaviness that followed me the rest of the day. Later that evening, Mr. Hensley called to update me. I've been made aware that your brother has consulted another attorney, he said. He's claiming possible undue influence. I laughed softly. Of course he is. Don't worry, he said reassuringly. Your decision was witnessed, documented, and recorded while you were mentally competent. There's nothing they can do. I'm not worried, I said, though part of me ached at how predictable it all was. When I hung up, Mara was standing by the window, looking out at the dark city beyond. He's trying to contest it, isn't he? She asked quietly. Yes, I said. But he won't win. She turned to me, her eyes sad. I wish they'd just let you be at peace. I smiled faintly. Peace doesn't interest people like that, only control. She crossed the room and sat on the chair beside my bed. You know, I've seen this before, she said softly. Kind people making hard choices and everyone else painting them as villains. I raised an eyebrow. You've been a nurse that long? She chuckled. Long enough. Once, I took care of a woman named June. Her kids only showed up when they wanted something, never when she was sick, never when she was scared. But her neighbor came every day, read to her, fed her, sat in silence with her. When June passed, she left everything to that neighbor. Her kids called her heartless. I smiled sadly. Let me guess, they said the neighbor manipulated her? Exactly. What happened to the neighbor? Mara smiled softly. She cried for months. Not because of the inheritance, she donated most of it, but because she missed her friend. That story lingered with me long after Mara left that night. Maybe people like us, the ones who gave and gave until we broke, were destined to be misunderstood. But maybe that didn't matter anymore. The next few days passed quietly, though I noticed the change in how people looked at me. Some avoided eye contact, others stared too long. Even the hospital administrator stopped by just to check in, though I could see the curiosity behind her polite smile. One evening, Mara came in and closed the door behind her. "You might want to know," she said gently. "Your family's been talking to reporters." I froze. "Reporters?" "Local paper," she said. "Apparently your brother's trying to raise awareness about financial exploitation." A humorless laugh escaped me. "So now I'm a headline. Only to people who don't know you," she said. "To the rest of us, you're the woman who survived a stroke and found her backbone." Her defense warmed me more than I could admit. "You always know what to say," I said. She shrugged modestly. "Occupational hazard." For the rest of the evening, she stayed in the room, refusing to leave me alone with my thoughts. She told me about her life before nursing, the years she spent caring for her mother, the loneliness that came after. I listened quietly, realizing how much strength hid behind her calm exterior. "Do you ever regret choosing this life?" I asked. She smiled, wistfully. "No, I've had moments of exhaustion, yes, but never regret. I've seen enough to know that compassion is the only thing that makes this world bearable." Her words made something inside me soften. "You make it sound so simple." "It is," she said. "Compassion doesn't need to be loud to be powerful." For a long while, we just sat in comfortable silence, the hum of the machines filling the room. As she was leaving, I said, "Mara?" She turned back. "Yes? Thank you. For staying kind in a world that keeps giving people reasons not to be." She smiled, her eyes glinting in the low light. "Thank you for noticing." That night, as I drifted to sleep, I felt something shift inside me. The anger, the bitterness, it was fading. What remained was quiet gratitude. But peace, it seemed, wasn't meant to last. Early the next morning, I woke to a strange tightness in my chest. The monitors started beeping rapidly, alarms slicing through the silence. My vision blurred, and panic flooded my veins. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was Mara's face, eyes wide, voice trembling as she called for help. Then, one morning, my body betrayed me again. It happened suddenly, just like the first time. One moment, I was sitting up, breathing slowly, waiting for Mara to bring my morning tea. The next, my chest felt like it was caving in. A sharp pain shot down my left arm, and my vision dimmed at the edges. The beeping of the monitors sped up, shrill and unrelenting, a frantic rhythm that mirrored the chaos inside me. I remember trying to call out her name, Mara, but the word came out slurred, almost foreign. Panic seized me as I struggled to reach the call button. Before I could press it, the door burst open. Mara was there. She didn't hesitate. "Code Blue, room 318, she shouted, her voice cutting through the panic like steel. Within seconds, the room filled with motion, doctors, nurses, machines, noise. I felt cold hands on my skin, the pressure of a mask over my face, the sting of needles, the weight of the unknown pressing down. Through the haze, I could hear snippets of voices. "She's going into cardiac distress. Pressure's dropping. Epinephrine now." And then Mara's voice, calm, commanding, familiar. "Stay with me, Elena. You're okay. I've got you." It was strange how much power that one voice had. Even as the world around me blurred into chaos, her voice was an anchor. I tried to focus on it, to hold on. But everything began to fade. There was a moment, brief but vivid, when the world went completely quiet. The sounds disappeared, the pain dissolved, and I felt weightless, as though I were floating above it all. I could see flashes of light, moving like distant stars. And then I heard it again, faint but unmistakable. Mara's voice. "Please, stay with me." That voice pulled me back. When I opened my eyes again, the lights were dim, and the room was quiet. My chest felt heavy, my throat dry, but I was alive. My body ached as though I'd been run through a storm and barely crawled out the other side. Mara was there, sitting beside me, her hands trembling slightly as she held mine. Her eyes were red, her mascara smudged from tears. "Hey," she whispered, her voice thick with relief. "You scared me." I tried to speak, but my voice came out as a rasp. "How long?" She smiled faintly. "A few hours. They stabilized you. You're going to be okay." I blinked slowly, trying to take it in. Her hand was still wrapped around mine, warm and steady. "You stayed?" Her smile softened. "Of course I did." I stared at her, my chest tightening not from pain this time but from something deeper. Gratitude, connection, a kind of love that had nothing to do with romance or obligation. It was the kind that grows between two people who have seen each other's rawest selves and stayed anyway. "Thank you," I whispered. She shook her head, squeezing my hand. "Don't thank me. Just rest." But rest didn't come easily. My mind replayed flashes of what had happened, the fear, the fading, the way her voice had pulled me back from the edge. I realized then how fragile everything was. Life, time, trust, all of it balanced on threads thinner than we ever admit. Later that evening, after the doctors confirmed I was stable, Mara sat with me again. The lights were low, the world outside wrapped in quiet night. She looked exhausted. But she didn't leave. "You should go home," I said softly. "Get some rest." She shook her head. "Not tonight, Mara." "No," she said gently, but firmly. "I'm staying. You can't get rid of me that easily." That made me laugh weakly. "I wouldn't want to." We sat there in silence for a while, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. Every so often, she'd glance over to check my breathing, or adjust the blanket when I shivered. Her movements were automatic, habitual, but filled with care. After a long pause, she said quietly, "You know, when I first started nursing, I told myself I wouldn't get attached to patients. It's too hard when you lose them." I turned my head toward her. "And now?" She smiled faintly. "Now I know that caring is worth the heartbreak, every time." Something in my chest loosened. I wanted to tell her what she meant to me, that she had given my final chapter purpose, that her kindness had rewritten everything my family's greed had tried to erase. But all I managed was, "You've made these days easier." She reached over, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead. "And you've reminded me why I do this." We stayed like that for a while, the machines humming softly around us, our hands still clasped together. I realized then that if this was the last season of my life, I was okay with it. Because at least, finally, it felt like mine. When the night nurse came in to check on me, Mara finally stood. "I'll be back first thing in the morning," she said. "Promise?" She smiled. "Promise." As she walked to the door, I whispered, "You stayed." She turned back, eyes glistening. "I always will." When she left, the room felt warm despite the chill of the air conditioning. I closed my eyes, listening to the rhythm of the heart monitor, each steady beep a quiet miracle. That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. When you know you're running out of time, every breath feels sacred. The doctors didn't say it directly at first. They used words like complications and fragile and monitor closely. But I knew. I could feel it in my bones, the way my chest tightened with every breath, how my body took longer each morning to remember how to move. It wasn't fear that came with that knowledge. It was clarity. When Dr. Patel finally sat beside my bed and folded her hands, I met her eyes before she spoke. "It's my heart, isn't it?" I asked. She nodded gently. "We're doing everything we can to keep you stable, but another cardiac event could—" Her voice softened. "It could be too much for your body to handle." I smiled faintly. "Then I suppose it's time to stop pretending I'm invincible." She hesitated. "You're remarkably calm about this." "I've already made my peace," I said. "There's not much left to do except make sure everything's in order." When she left, I sat in silence, staring at the sunlight spilling through the window. It painted soft golden lines across the blanket, and I thought about how even light could look gentle when it was fading. A few minutes later, Mara walked in with my morning meds and her usual warmth. "Good morning," she said, though her smile faltered when she saw my expression. You okay? I just had a chat with Dr. Patel, I said quietly. Her eyes searched mine. And it's time, I said, softly. I'm not scared. Just ready. She blinked rapidly, her composure cracking for the first time since I'd met her. Don't say that, she whispered. You've come so far. Mara, I said gently, reaching for her hand. You've given me more time than I ever thought I'd have, but I need you to do something for me now. She swallowed hard. Anything. I need you to help me finish things right. That afternoon, I asked Mr. Hensley to visit one last time. He arrived looking solemn but composed, his briefcase tucked neatly under his arm. Mara stayed in the room despite my family's earlier protests this time. I wanted her there. Miss Turner, Mr. Hensley said, sitting beside me. Everything has been finalized as per your last directive. But if you have any final notes, letters, or personal requests, we can add them today. I do, I said. I've written letters, one for my family, one for you, and one for Mara. Mara's eyes widened, but I kept going. The one for my family is short. I don't expect it to change them, but I need them to know that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means I won't carry their cruelty with me. Mr. Hensley nodded. I'll make sure it's delivered privately. I smiled faintly. And as for Mara, well, that one's not for legal reasons. It's just something I want her to have. He understood without asking. Once he left, the air in the room felt heavier. Mara stood by the window, her back to me, wiping her eyes. You shouldn't be writing me letters, she said, her voice breaking. You should be making plans to go home. I smiled softly. I am. Just not to that home. She turned, tears slipping freely down her cheeks. Don't talk like that. I reached out my hand and she came closer. I need you to know something, I said. You've been my peace, Mara. When I couldn't find it anywhere else, you gave it to me. You made me feel human again. She shook her head. You did that yourself. No, I whispered. You reminded me how. For the rest of the afternoon, she didn't leave my side. She read to me from my favorite book, the same one she'd borrowed from the hospital shelf weeks earlier. Her voice was soft, melodic, and each word felt like a lullaby for a life I had finally made peace with. When she stopped reading, the room was quiet except for the faint hum of the machines. I could feel my heartbeat slowing, not alarmingly, but gently, as if my body was preparing itself for stillness. Mara, I said after a long silence. Promise me something. She wiped her cheeks. Anything. When I'm gone, don't let them twist the story. Let them say what they want, but don't you let them take away the truth. You were the only one who cared not for what I had, but for who I was. She nodded, sobbing quietly now. I promise. Good, I whispered, smiling faintly. Then I can rest. She leaned forward, clutching my hand tightly. You're not going anywhere tonight, you hear me? She said, half pleading, half commanding. I laughed softly. Bossy until the end, huh? Only because I care, she said, her voice cracking again. I squeezed her hand weakly. I know. As the night grew deeper, the lights dimmed, and the world outside faded into silence. Mara sat beside me, still holding my hand, still reading softly even as her voice wavered. I could feel my body growing heavier, my breath slower. It wasn't painful. It was peaceful, like slipping into warm water. The edges of the room began to blur, and Mara's voice sounded farther away. She noticed immediately. Elena? She whispered. Hey, stay with me. I tried to open my eyes, but my body wouldn't obey. My lips barely moved as I whispered. You stayed. Her grip tightened. Always. she said through tears. I'm right here. And she was. Even as the machines began to beep louder, even as the world tilted toward darkness, she was there. Her hand in mine, her voice breaking as she whispered my name. It was the last thing I heard before everything went still. I fell asleep to her voice and never woke up again. When my will was read, the silence in that room was deafening. The day of the reading came a week after my funeral. I wasn't there to see it, of course, but I can imagine it vividly. Because Mr. Hensley described it later in his journal entry, which Mara found among his notes. And besides, I knew my family too well to be surprised by their reactions. It took place in Mr. Hensley's office, a narrow, wood-paneled room that smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. Rain drummed softly against the windows as Aaron and Lisa arrived, both dressed in somber black that looked more performative than sincere. Megan trailed behind them, her phone in hand, scrolling even during introductions. Mara sat quietly in the corner, clutching the strap of her purse, her posture stiff, as if she didn't belong there. She hadn't wanted to attend, but Mr. Hensley insisted. You deserve to hear it, he told her gently. Aaron sat with his arms crossed, jaw tight. Lisa was already whispering. It's all formalities, she muttered to him. She probably just left us instructions about the house. Mr. Hensley entered, his expression unreadable. He sat behind the desk and carefully opened the folder marked Turner, Elena, Last Will and Testament. The rain outside grew louder, like the sky itself was eavesdropping. Thank you all for coming, he began. Your sister, Miss Turner, requested that I read her will in full, without interruptions. I'd appreciate your cooperation. Aaron rolled his eyes. Get on with it. Mr. Hensley nodded and began to read. His voice was steady, clear, every word landing with quiet precision. To my brother Aaron and his wife Lisa, I leave my forgiveness, though not my possessions. You both had every opportunity to show love when I needed it, but instead, you chose convenience. I hope one day you realize that kindness is worth more than inheritance. Lisa gasped softly, her face draining of color. Aaron's expression hardened, a muscle twitching in his jaw. To my niece, Megan, I leave my grandmother's pearls, the only thing I own that represents grace passed down through generations. I hope you find your own kind of grace, one not defined by what you can take, but by what you can give. Megan looked up from her phone, eyes wide. For the first time, she seemed to understand that this wasn't going the way her parents had planned. Then Mr. Hensley paused, turning the page slowly. And to Nurse Mara Collins, who showed me the meaning of compassion when everyone else had forgotten it, I leave my home, my savings, and the trust account established under my name. You cared for me not because you had to, but because you wanted to. You reminded me that humanity still exists in its purest form in simple acts of kindness. I hope this gift allows you to continue spreading that kindness to others. For a long moment, no one spoke. The room was heavy with disbelief. Lisa was the first to break. You can't be serious, she shouted, her voice trembling. A nurse? She barely knew her. This is absurd. Mr. Hensley didn't flinch. I assure you, Mrs. Langley, the will was signed and witnessed while Miss Turner was of sound mind. Aaron leaned forward, his voice cold. We'll contest this. She was manipulated. She was not, Mr. Hensley said sharply. I spoke to your sister at length. Every word of this was her decision. Made freely and calmly. Mara sat frozen. Eyes wide. Tears glistening but unshed. I didn't ask for any of this, she whispered. Aaron turned on her instantly. Oh, I bet you didn't, he spat. You probably played the perfect saint until she fell for it. Mara shook her head, her voice trembling. You weren't there. You didn't see what she went through. Enough, Mr. Hensley said firmly. You will not speak to her that way. The air crackled with tension. Lisa was crying now, angry tears, the kind that came from losing control. She was our family. Mr. Hensley looked at her, his voice measured. Yes, and that is why this hurts. But sometimes family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by love. Miss. Turner knew that better than anyone. He folded the papers neatly and looked at Mara. There's one more thing. From his folder, he pulled out a small sealed envelope with Mara's name written in Elena's neat handwriting. She wanted me to give this to you personally. Mara hesitated, her hands trembling as she took it. The handwriting alone was enough to undo her composure. Inside, the letter was short Elena's style to the end. My dear Mara, if you're reading this, it means my story is over, but yours is just beginning. You once told me compassion doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. You were right. Use what I've left not as a burden, but as a bridge to help others like me, who feel unseen. You gave me peace. Now I want you to live freely, knowing you earned every ounce of this. Thank you for staying when no one else did. With love, Elena. Mara's tears finally fell, silent and steady. She folded the letter carefully, pressing it to her chest. Aaron stood abruptly. This isn't over, he hissed. We'll fight it. Mr. Hensley's tone turned cold. You can try. But I wouldn't advise it. You'll lose. Lisa glared at Mara one last time before storming out, dragging Megan behind her. The door slammed so hard the window rattled. For a long while, only the rain filled the silence. Mara sat still, the letter in her hands, her heart pounding with grief and disbelief. Mr. Hensley spoke softly. She meant every word, you know. I didn't do anything special, Mara said weakly. I just cared. He smiled sadly. That's exactly what made it special. As the rain eased outside, the lawyer stood and handed Mara a single silver key. Her house is yours now. She wanted you to see the tulips first. Mara stared at it, tears welling again. Tulips? Mr. Hensley nodded. She said they reminded her of hope. Mara closed her hand around the key, her heart aching. She whispered, almost to herself. Thank you, Elena. And when the lawyer handed Mara the key to my house, the room fell silent again. They say you die twice, once when you take your last breath, and again when your name is spoken for the last time. Months had passed since my funeral, yet Mara carried my presence with her every day. She visited the house I left her, tending it as if it were a living thing, dusting shelves, watering plants, and arranging the tulips that had been my favorite. To her, this wasn't just a home, it was a legacy, one that needed to be nurtured and honored, not sold or wasted. The house smelled faintly of lavender and old wood, the combination comforting and alive. Mara moved through each room carefully, leaving my mark untouched. Every photograph, every book on the shelf, every small detail remained exactly as I had left it. She didn't have to do it. But she did because she understood that my life's final choices weren't about possessions, but about respect and memory. She started a small foundation in my name, quietly helping patients without family support. She took her compassion further, making sure the people I cared for, even posthumously, had a chance at comfort and dignity. She named it the Elena Turner Fund. And the first project was providing hospital companionship programs for lonely patients. Neighbors whispered, "Of course." My family never came by. They spread rumors and wondered how Mara had managed to take control so completely, but she ignored them, focused instead on the lives she could touch. That was always her way. Every year, on Thanksgiving, she set a place at her table for me. A single tulip sat in a vase beside the plate, a quiet symbol of what mattered most: care, kindness, and remembrance. Mara never spoke of the inheritance in public, nor did she flaunt it. To her, the gift I had left her was sacred, meant not for pride, but for purpose. One quiet evening, she sat in the living room, the soft glow of the lamps reflecting off the hardwood floors. The tulips cast shadows across the room, and the wind carried the faint hum of the city outside. She took a deep breath, running her fingers across the cover of one of my favorite books, the one she'd read to me in my final days. She whispered my name, not out of sorrow but out of acknowledgement. "Elena," she said softly, "you taught me more than you'll ever know." And it was true. My family had been so concerned with what I could give them that they had never truly seen me. Mara did. She had stayed when everyone else left, cared without expecting, and understood without judgment. The key to the house had been hers for months, yet it had never felt like ownership. It was stewardship of memory, of love, of everything I had stood for in my final days. Each room, each flower, each book was a bridge between the life I had lived and the difference I wanted to leave behind. On a quiet morning, Mara walked through the garden, her hands brushing over the tulips. She paused, inhaling their fragrance. "I'll never forget," she whispered. Not a single detail. The story of my family's greed would fade with time, as all stories do. But the kindness I had left, the recognition of a heart that saw me for me, would continue in Mara's hands. In that quiet house, in that humble foundation. The legacy endured not in money, nor in titles, but in the simple, unbreakable truth that love, care, and attention matter more than any inheritance. Neighbors would gossip, people would speculate. But Mara didn't need their approval. She had mine, and that was enough. She continued to visit the hospital, bringing comfort to patients who were unseen and unheard, quietly carrying forward the lesson I had hoped to leave behind, that those who care, without expectation, are the ones who deserve to inherit life's true wealth. Every night, she sat in the living room with a cup of tea, the tulips glowing faintly beside her. Sometimes she read aloud, sometimes she simply listened to the quiet hum of the house, and always, she remembered. I had left my estate to her not out of obligation, nor because she demanded it, but because she had earned it in the way that mattered most. Because in the end, love not blood was the true inheritance,